Hey, everybody. Happy Wine Wednesday. I hope you are having a fabulous week and that if you have seahorses or aquariums that they're doing fantastic. Today, if you're on Instagram, as per usual, still trying to figure out how to get the faces shown in the correct format, but you can always still just listen along to us chat. Today, I've got Ray, Holly, and Cheryl Taylor with me, and we'll be chatting about seahorses. However, if you want to ask a question or you want to see the full video, hop on over to YouTube, search Seahorse Whisperer, and there we are. We're only like 120 people away from 3,000 subscribers. We're going to be doing a contest. So when you do head over to YouTube, make sure you subscribe because the winner will be within the subscribers. So, and thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed and stick to the channel, even though I haven't done many videos lately. I really appreciate it. I will have the MACNA videos for both Seahorse and Pipefish event and Women in Reefing up this week before I leave for vacation. And exciting news, I will be visiting Dan. That's not the whole vacation, of course, I'm doing family stuff, but I will be visiting Dan likely on the 22nd, which is a Wednesday. So we might just have a live Wine Wednesday. And either way, I will be doing as much taping as we're able to do with him. So look forward to that. I'm going to be posting. Basically, I'm hoping for everybody to comment on my post questions or message me questions you'd like to hear and answered by Seahorse Source, because I will be with him. So I will be asking him questions and videoing the responses. So, or maybe even doing it live. So definitely watch for that post, ask some questions so that we can have some great conversation. I'm sipping on Chardonnay tonight, and that's about all I got. I do have a wine glass now, everybody. Yay. But anyhow, okay. How we doing, everybody? I know Holly has some specific questions, and I think Cheryl has some news. Do you have, besides your cute little seahorse ornaments behind you, what's going on with your babes and everything else?
Well, I had a male deliver 3 morning fry this morning. The problem I have is I'm not sure which one it was because all 3 of them have been keeping their pouches inflated. And there's only one female in there right now that's big enough to do an egg transfer.
Mm.
And I don't think she got 3 males pregnant.
So we're going to have a Maury show, Who's Your Mama, this time instead of Daddy, right? No, but it doesn't really matter except for, you want, and what's the reason that you do want to know, Cheryl? Just because so you can keep F1 separate and all that good stuff? Or you just want to know? Does it matter?
Well, from my perspective, I know that most commercial breeders recommend not going past keeping F2. And although we did do some research years ago on the org with Marty involved in it, and he found that he could go up to F10 generation without any abnormalities.
Wow.
However, it doesn't mean something might show up at a later date. That's possible too. And the thing is with me, what I'll end up doing probably is giving them time out in another tank for good behavior.
Yep.
And do it that way because I don't want to. I've got 6 nursery tubs going, but I also have to, and I'm rearranging and setting up more grow out tanks because I know what's going to happen.
Right.
But it's one of those things where I don't want to get to the point where I'm just letting them go.
Right.
But at the same time, too, I want to keep the adults healthy.
I'm absolutely thinking that the false pregnant, I thought my male was pregnant until I saw him 3 weeks after. We discussed this last week. All of a sudden doing the dance again and opening his pouch and flushing again. And so there wasn't any babies there. So he tricked me, and now he looks pregnant again. And I'm sure he's going to give birth while I'm on vacation. I already know it.
That makes sense.
But,
yeah,
there'll be more chances.
Tell the kids they got to stay home and look after it.
That'd be great. I wish I could do that. But no, they're pretty excited to see all their cousins. My entire family gets together and goes. But anyways, I'm trying to get my head out of the sea dragon's mouth. He's eating my hair. But okay. Well, congrats, Cheryl, on being prepared as always and having wonderful baby batches. You're still succeeding with all of them, right? They're still doing well? Yep. Good. Okay. All right, Miss Holly, you wanted to talk about what? What did you want to talk about?
Yeah, amphipods, because I just had some arrive today, all the way from Florida. They made it, and so I set them up in a big Tupperware bin. It's like between 3 and 5 gallons, and I was reading a little bit about them because I've never raised them before. So I read they like to crawl around on stuff. So I put a just a normal rock that I had and some plastic plants down in there for them.
Well, yeah,
And
they don't
then
like
reading about them, I read, that they'll eat pretty much most anything that fish type eat. So I didn't have anything for them. I gave them some tropical flakes that I feed my freshwater fish.
That worked fine.
Just because I was reading the ingredients and it has spirulina and fish meal and things, I'm like, that's probably okay. So I gave them a tiny bit of that, but I've never
One suggestion was,
before, so I don't know how sensitive they are to temperatures or what kind of care they need. If you guys could kind of fill me in on any tips that you have on them.
instead of a rock, put in rock rubble.
Yeah.
More
Oh, that
spaces you have
reminds me.
in the frame to hide, there's less cannibalism, and you'll end up with higher yields in the end.
I was going to ask, I have this. So this is some old ceramic media from, actually, I last used it 13 years ago. I guess it was 2008, but I haven't cleaned it other than I think way back then. That looks clean. So obviously I rinsed it out and everything, but I haven't bleached it or vinegared it. Do you think it's safe to just throw that in there, or should I
It
put
won't
it?
work like the rubble, though. The rubble, when you put it in there, creates little niches that the Nepali are small enough to get into, and the adults
Uh-huh.
with what you have there, you're not going to have all those little niches. You'll have
Gotcha.
certain spots, like it'll provide little spots, but not too many that the adults aren't going to be able to get at.
So where can I find that, and what exactly is it? Because I've never seen that before.
Reef
I
rock,
have some. I'll be right back.
rock that has basically been crushed up, or just in time it falls apart, or in handling. You can take one and break it apart with a hammer.
Yeah. I've
I'll
got a
have to see.
rubber rock.
I've never seen that before.
Okay, here we go. I got it. Okay, so this is just one kind. There's many. I'm not.
Oh,
it's
so
not
you can actually find it by the name rubble, and it'll show you. Okay.
Or you could, like Ray was saying, just break up some rock. I mean, you just want little.
So I don't really have any. I'd have to get the rock, and I don't want to use like rocks from my tank or anything because I don't want to contaminate them. Right? That's something to probably be careful about, I would imagine.
Well, I can send you
contaminating them with like water from your tank. Like if you have like something going on in your tank and you transfer water to the amphipods, is that a danger of them picking up on stuff like diseases or parasite type situations? What's that, Ray?
You always have the chance of spreading.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Holly,
totally eliminate it. All you can do is try and minimize it.
Yeah, but actually, on that note, with amphipods, they can't get the same things that like a seahorse can get unless you're talking bacterial. I don't understand that. Can you tell me a little bit more?
What's the bacteria that do get to the seahorses?
So it's just bacteria.
What's our major problem with seahorses? It's all caused by bacteria usually.
Gotcha. Okay. I was just asking. Well, Holly, I was going to say the reason it's dusty, and Lord help me, is because I haven't used this for a long time. As you can see, I actually use this whole container and I poked, I'm trying to poked little holes. There's little holes here all the way around and then a hole in the top. And I use this in a sump as like additional filtration, and the water would go through there and come out here and kind of spin around in there. So anyways, I don't use it anymore. If you want it, I can send it to you. You'd probably want to bleach it and all that, but
Yeah,
Yeah, so I have a question.
do a
How
light bleaching
long
on it.
before something's sanitary to use like that? Like if you haven't used something in that many years, do you still need to bleach and all that? Or how long does it take for
I usually
something?
always bleached and then treated with the Chloramax afterwards.
right. But I get her question. The question, I mean, I understand the question because I've wondered that too. Like if I have rock that sat in a dry tank, whether I had problems in that tank or not, if it sat dry in no water for 2 years, is it still possible to have? I mean, obviously, I know Aptasia can still survive. Yikes.
Something
But
parasitic species could survive through that. And I always, when it gets bleached and then thoroughly rinsed, anytime I'm pulling out rock and getting ready to move it to another tank. And I have a ton of rubble rock because all my sumps are built with baffles that I fill the baffle in the sump with the rubble rock. And I've probably sterilized in the last couple of weeks a couple 100 pounds worth of rock.
And see, now I do that, but years ago I didn't. So I have this bag of stuff and it's 13 years old. So I'm like, is that long enough that I shouldn't have to worry about anything, or should I still bleach it and all that?
Well, the problem is some of these species can go into a dormant stage
Ah,
and they can survive for prolonged periods of time. And again, we don't actually have a clear handle on a lot of the species, but a lot of them actually just go dormant. They'll leave eggs, and when they get back in the water again, they'll hatch.
well, yeah, because brine shrimp do that, right? Their eggs can be out like forever,
yeah,
right?
right.
Still hatch, so that makes sense. I gotcha.
Real quick before your next question, we had a couple from Francis. Are you supposed to rinse amphipods and cocoapods before you add them to the seahorse tank? Do you guys rinse like you do frozen foods or like you do brine shrimp or whatever? Do you rinse or what do you do? Cheryl?
The biggest thing is the amphipods that I'm rearing, they're in basically a nursery system. And it's completely separate from anything else that has to do with seahorses. And so I'm not overly concerned with having to sterilize them, and the population just keeps growing. But it's one of those things too. With my amphipods, as Holly already pointed out, they'll eat just about anything. And I've been feeding mine. Mine will eat frozen mysis shrimp when I thaw it out for the seahorses. I always put a little bit in the nursery for them.
Oh, wow.
I'm feeding them Reef Nutrition, the TDO pellets.
Yeah.
They love that stuff. And I've also got some of the enrichments that I'm playing around with from Ocean Rider, and they jump on that.
Wow. And really quick with the TDO pellets, because I'm going to get with Chad. I didn't have a chance this week, but I'm going to try to get on the show and talk a little bit about how the coloration is coming out in your seahorses possibly because of that. But with the TDO, do you crush it up or do you just throw them in?
No, it has different sizes of pellets. And the smallest size is, I mean, it's more than small enough for any of the adults. And the newborns they'll pile on this stuff, and you can see them come out from everywhere and jump on this food.
Nice.
They really, really like it. They're growing, so.
And Ray, you have a different answer though. You actually use peroxide and et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about what you're saying in the comments?
Yeah, the most common thing that I use when I want the easy way out is using peroxide, because I can peroxide something and it's not going to affect the tank or the culture, whatever I'm going to do afterwards. If I'm being on the cheap side and need a lot of something that would require a lot of peroxide, I tend to go with the bleach and then use the Chloramax, which I guess you people there normally would use prime in its place to neutralize the bleach afterwards. And then even after I neutralize it, I still give it a good rinsing after that. but it's just, I guess, many years ago, I had enough problems, and I was trying to eliminate cross-contamination or even contamination from not even using it in something else, but just maybe it's sitting around and maybe collecting something, spores out of the air, whatever. I didn't know a lot back then, and so this was the way I started, and it's something that just sort of kept on all the time, because I figured if I stop doing it and run into problems, I'm going to regret it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I have every single system has its own set, everything from siphons to syringes, so I can put on my TDS meter, uh, air pumps. Everything is tank specific, and when I take down a tank, I take everything apart. Everything gets sterilized.
Right.
And it's like even my hitches, they go into a bucket of hydrogen peroxide and get left at least for 24 hours, then rinse and dry, and then set them aside for the next round. So you can't be too careful. I mean, and everything, I literally have labels on everything. It's like G1 is grow out tank 1, G2, and so on. And everything's
Holly, I promise we will. I promise we will get back to all your questions. Oh, you're showing us your
same thing. See, it says GO grow out. That's their feeding kit.
love it.
Yeah, same thing. I have one for every tank.
Well, I know you have more questions, but let's just get through. Francis, we really appreciate when people come and ask questions. So thank you. We really appreciate this, and I hope we're helping. Definitely tools, separate tools for every tank. But with the amphipods, I'm honestly surprised that you guys don't rinse them. And the reason I say that, I know that Cheryl, you have everything, you know what you're doing, you have everything set up perfectly. But like if I were to get some, for instance, when I got Artemia from the store, if I had rinsed it, or if I had done peroxide or something, and Ray, I want you to talk about like what you do with peroxide, but if I had done something like that, then I wouldn't have ended up with all these tiny benthic copepods that I think are pestering the seahorses, right? So I wish I had rinsed them. And with Artemia, we say rinse, so why not with amphipods? I'm just curious.
I'm sure you can. I haven't tried using peroxide on them, but right now they're only going into one tank, and I've been doing this now for several months just with this current batch, and I haven't had a bit of problem with them.
But I think Dan said don't use peroxide on the pods. I remember him telling me that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they would.
That'll be a question I'll ask him, and we're also going to try to do an actual example of using peroxide with Artemia. But that's a question I will ask. But go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
And the thing, when I buy peroxide, I buy it in gallon containers, the 35%, and then I mix my own for whatever I need. And it's actually, in the long run, you save money as long as you keep it, all the directions in terms of how to store it.
Gotcha. But Ray,
I paint my bottle black that I store it in. I buy it in 5-gallon carboils. They're a plastic container, great big wide mouth on it and that.
Yep.
And I siphon it into the smaller container. But it's all, I use black paint on it, spray paint it. And I've done a test. Mine is at 25% to start. I can't get 35 here, but mine is at 25%. And I did a test, mainly because I forgot about a bottle that was sitting on the shelf. And it was there for at least a couple of years.
Oh no.
Okay. I have lab hydrometers from when I used to work in a lab. And I took this and I measured the specific gravity, and it worked out it had only gone down to 21%.
Yeah.
Just a hair under 21%. So if you keep it dark and don't let it get too cold, don't let it get too hot, then it can last. It's going to degrade. There's no way to stop it. And every time you open the bottle, it's going to degrade somewhat. But the thing is, this bottle was sitting there for a couple of years, and so it was just a thought to give it a test at that time, and I was surprised that it hadn't dropped very much.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, one thing to be aware of too is my one son saw that I had an old water jug, and that's what I mixed it to cut it down to the 3% or 6% that I wanted. And he didn't read what said, "Do not drink hydrogen peroxide." And he took a big mouthful and swallowed it and called me in the hospital when I
Yeah.
was at work. And of course, I went flying up there, and he was fine. He wasn't, but fortunately, he didn't get very much.
Good.
But that's just something. If you have little ones, and he was beyond a little one at this point. He could easily read what was on the label, and he just
So,
wasn't paying attention.
yep. So Ray, real quick, before I go on to the, because there's a couple more questions, and then I know Holly has more questions. I promise we will go back to it, Holly. But Ray, so I got confused, but when you said using peroxide, you mean on the tools, not on the amphipods, right?
I actually used it on amphipods, but that was long. I was doing that before Dan ever said anything about not using it on them, and I figured, well, it never killed them.
Yeah.
So I kept on. I figured.
Well, I was just going to ask you how you did it. Like, what did you do?
Well, basically, it was pretty much the same strength as what Dan started posting a long time ago, and I don't remember exact numbers right now. And because I don't use it all that often anymore, I haven't only the abs left. I'm not doing the brine shrimp anymore. I'm not doing any copepod or amphipod cultures. The copepods, they were only for the reed-eye fry when I was raising the reed-eye, because they're useless for anything other than fry.
But well, don't worry about it. That's hard.
My cognitive impairment, I have to go and look up every time because it's too far in between when I mix up a new batch.
Yeah.
And basically, all I do is I click on Dan's piece for the dilution factor. But for me, I do it a little bit different. First of all, like how do I say it? For brine shrimp, I do it different because I sterilize them. I don't decapsulate. I sterilize them with bleach and rinse quite a few minutes until all bleach smell is gone under the cold water tap. Then I put them in the hatching container, hatch them out. And after they're hatched out, I do the bleach. After I've separated them all, I do not a bleach. I do the peroxide treatment again, and then put them on grow them until I can feed them, because I don't use napli that are newborn. I don't use them as food or anything. So I on-grow them for a day and then start growing them. And if I need napli for something, I'll pull them out after a day of feeding and enrichment. But most of them go into the 35-gallon tubs for growing out to adults. But I do the peroxide at each stage. Once I separate them, I do the peroxide. Once I on-grow them, and when I change the water, I peroxide again.
Yep.
Just maybe it's overkill, but in my mind, I'm feeding that culture water. There are spores in the air that are attracting bacteria. The brine eat that food that has the bacteria that's now theoretically growing in it. And I just want to lessen the chance. And because I'm buying the peroxide economically, it's looking off my nose.
Well, no, and that's kind of why I was asking about the amphipods. And I know Cheryl uses peroxide too, and we've got like 10 other questions, so we got to kind of move on.
I have the formula for the peroxide.
Go ahead, Holly.
For me, I use the hair peroxide, the clear developer, and it's 40 volume peroxide. You would put 60 milliliters in 1 liter of water. is the
Gotcha.
recipe for that. And then you let it go 1.5 minutes with aeration and 3.5 minutes without aeration. But I haven't thought, I mean, that was one of my questions about the amphipods, actually, because they're not copepods. I mean, when Dan
Right.
said don't use peroxide, I was asking him about copepods.
Copepods.
So I
Right.
don't
And
know if amphipods are different. It sounds like what Ray says, the peroxide doesn't hurt them.
right.
So I don't
That's
see why it would
well,
hurt to do that, because in my mind, like you were saying, they're
better
dirty.
safe than
They're
sorry.
going to be
Yeah.
living in water, you know, with their food in it and whatever, gathering bacteria. So
One simple way to
Exactly.
find out. If you have some doubts, take a few, give it a
Try
try.
it. Yep.
If it doesn't
Mhm.
work for you, you're using too much.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
don't forget, guys, as I said, we're going to have a live with Seahorse Source in just 2 weeks. So we can ask all of these questions again. So definitely make sure you come back, because everybody does things differently. And I agree with Ray 100%. You know, try something on a few and see. All right, we got to push forward. We don't have an answer quite yet about peroxide with pods, but we will get it to you. Okay, how many live amphipods? What size live amphipods should we be used when culturing amphipods? Sorry, I can't say that
Get
word.
the adults.
What was it?
Get the adults. They're the ones that are producing.
Yeah. You get if you get the Grameris amphipods, they're easy to work with, and they actually get to be a decent. The adults are quite suitable for the larger seahorses.
Yeah.
The
yeah, mine are pretty
newborns.
big ones that came.
Yeah.
I got them from Are You Salty, like you said, and they're big. I got an order of 250 of them. And yeah, they're decent size.
So how many do you guys feed each week? Francis said, I have an issue where I strain the amphipods from the culturing tank, but I'm afraid I'm taking too many out per week. Like, in order to keep the population going is what I'm assuming, and also too many in the tank, maybe. So do you have a measurement?
With amphipods is because they thrive on hiding.
Mm.
They can be real annoying because try putting a sponge in there, and you can spend the next 6 weeks trying to get those amphipods out of there. They'll go in there and they're not moving.
Well, I
And
found something out today. They're like fleas. I stuck
Oh,
my
yeah.
hand in the water and they all jumped on it.
right, because
And I'm like,
they will actually crawl out of the water. And like
yeah,
I'll
they
find
did. They were crawling like ants up my
Yeah.
arm, and I'm like,
And-
oh, you got it.
Oh, gross. Sorry.
when I net them to feed them out, I'm ended up sitting there trying to pick them off the net, and then they're crawling up my hand as I'm trying to get them into the tank.
Oof. Gross.
They're pretty.
They can't
funny.
survive outside the water, though, right? I mean, they're not literally like fleas, right? Now you're scaring
Well,
me.
apparently for a little while. I mean, enough time to be brave enough to come out of the water.
The thing is, if check your filter socks. It's like when I check my filter socks after I fed out the amphipods, and I feed it not every day, but at least every other day. And if I've got adults in my filter socks, I fed too many.
Do you,
Because the seahorses
do you
didn't
know
get
about how many per seahorse you give?
Is there a
usually?
number? Yeah.
Like a general idea?
I
I
probably
never
when I
ever
feed
went
them,
with numbers. I just threw some in and let them have a couple for each one, and that was it, because it was only an auxiliary food providing
Yeah,
maybe a
I'm
nutrition
thinking
they
more
weren't
for a
getting
treat.
from the mysis.
Or if
And,
I'm somebody in the hospital, you know, that kind of situation is what I mainly have them for. So I don't plan on feeding a lot of them, but I'm just wondering, you know, how many is a good number?
I think
to
you would
where
do
I
that,
won't-
Holly. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think you would do that just like you do frozen food. Feed some. If you come back and they're still all over the tank, you've fed too much.
Yeah.
If they're all
Yeah.
gone, maybe feed more the next time. You know what I mean? I don't think there's an
Exactly.
exact number. But
the problem with the filter sock, though, is you may have some that are washed into that part of the system right away, and you're going
True.
to have some in the sock there, and it's just because they were in the wrong place at the time to get sucked over, and you don't want them something making you think that you're giving too many when it wasn't anything to do with that.
Yeah.
True.
And I'm thinking too, because when I add Cocoapods for the Mandarin, I do it at night. And I
Mhm.
would shut the pump off for a little while so they're not going to immediately go into the filter sock, but it gives them a chance to go hide in the rocks, and whatever. So I'm thinking that's probably the way I'd add them to the tank
Mhm.
at
I've
some
got some artificial corals, and also a couple of one very holy rock in like the one tank. And what happens is I'll turn off the pumps. I'll leave the light on so I can watch them. And the seahorses have figured out where they go. And the seahorses didn't go.
They know where they're going.
And what's ironically, it's the two smaller ones that I have that are the most pod crazy, the amphipod crazy. The bigger ones are, I'm not going to put this much work into this crap.
Right, hunting. Gosh, when it comes to my dish. Yeah, right. Okay, real quick. Would I can't even say that word. Isopropyl alcohol be a safe cleaner as well? Ray, you answered in the comments, but what do you think about that?
Or if she's thinking of sterilizing with it, then it's a terrible idea.
Why?
It'll kill them.
Wait,
Oh, yeah.
kill what? Oh, the pods, you mean?
Yeah.
What about for
it'll kill life form.
what about for equipment? Just out of curiosity, why is peroxide such a good thing and like alcohol wouldn't work? Just
Peroxide
and like
washes
some people use vinegar.
They're altogether different things.
Right.
But like the peroxide, you can dump the peroxide in the tank, nothing's the matter. You dump the alcohol in the tank,
You're gonna have problems.
you'll screw up your skimmer for sure.
Yeah.
And if you got too much, it's going to kill the life forms off. Like just
Gotcha.
small amounts aren't going to do anything, but small amounts aren't going to do any cleaning either. I don't see, with the cost of isopropyl, and I buy 99.9% isopropyl, and I buy it by the 4-liter jug. And but I don't use it for my tanks. I have other things I use it for. But
Sure.
specifically when COVID come on, that's my sterilizer. I have it in little spray bottles, and it's better than any damn thing you can buy. And even at in Canadian money, $50 for 4 liters, it's cheaper than the damn products they're selling. That
Oh,
are
yeah.
only about 70% as effective as what I'm doing, or not even that, because there's so many fraudulent ones out there. With
Right.
what I have, I'm buying it from a pharmacy that does lab work in it, and they buy this 99.9% level for their compounding. So I know
Yep.
what I'm getting, and
And you
I know
use
what
it
I'm
the way you're
putting on
supposed
me.
to.
That's
Absolutely. I swear Lysol and all those they banked over COVID, all right. But and that's another thing, just another little preview. I will definitely be talking extensively with Seahorse Source when I go visit him about peroxide, because he has some unusual ways he uses it, like even for human needs, not just seahorses and cleaning and tanks and etc. So definitely, I don't want to tell you incorrectly, but I can't wait to talk about that further. And you guys never feel bad about having to check like the file system on Seahorse Source. I'm telling you, every time anything comes up with me, even though I know the answers, I still start second guessing myself or don't know the exact measurements. I got to go check the files or call him. You know what I'm saying? So never think that that's a bad thing.
Just wait till you get older.
Hey, listen, Ray.
You get to the point sometimes you remember which page you got to go to find what you need.
Yeah, lucky, right? Exactly. Okay, does anyone run a full soft coral reef tank for tiger tail seahorses? If so, what would the sterilization process of the? Let's see if I can get the next one up. Hang on. Of copepods and live amphipods hurt the mushrooms and gorgonians corals in the tank as well?
It's going to be the same, because you're sterilizing the amphipods. You're not sterilizing the tank. So you're sterilizing the amphipods, and then you're doing a quick rinse, and then you're putting them in the tank. So it's not going to affect the tank.
And actually, to be honest with you, in my reef tank, peroxide was part of the process that I used in order to get rid of algae, and it never hurt anything. So
Yeah.
I don't. If you're talking about peroxide, then yeah, I would say no worries there at all, because I've used it directly in a reef tank, not just sterilizing anything. And again,
Seahorses
we're not.
only.
Go ahead, Ray.
You're talking about cocoapods. Cocoapods are useless for seahorses unless they're fry. So unless there's something else like a mandarin or something that's going to eat them, then there's no sense in adding them.
Right, cocoapods. And with amphipods, just to be clear, we're not giving you the green light on peroxide as Ray. It worked for Ray. We've got to double back and get some more advice about whether or not it's safe for amphipods. Ray had no problems with it, so they probably are. But if you're going to do it, try it with a few. Don't ruin your whole batch. But okay, let me see if there's any more questions, and then we can get back to Holly. Go ahead.
For a second.
Cheryl, go ahead.
Francis, when you're talking about tiger tails, hippocampus combs, in terms of coral, several years ago, I set up a softy tank with some tiger tails. They would not go near the corals. They never touched them. They completely avoided them. And I'm not sure, again, these were F1 generation from wild caughts, but they avoided all corals, which I found very fascinating.
If Heather's in the audience, we need to hear from you, Miss. We want to know what your experience has been. But go ahead, Cheryl. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just, it absolutely shocked me because we know that they're a reef dwelling, or they're been considered a reef dwelling species. And it made me wonder if they have an innate response to avoid all corals. Because I just thought it was very, very odd. As opposed to Erectus, you put it in the tank, they don't care what it is, they'll hitch to it.
That's interesting. I wonder if it has something to do with like anemones or something like that, would typically be in a reef. I don't know.
I don't know. I found it because I had mushrooms in there. I had some Nephthia. I had some Singularia. I mean, they were all legitimate soft corals. Since I had some Gorgas in there, they would not hitch to them.
Well, now wait. Now combs or what's tiger tails? They're typically found in hard coral reef type situations, right? Or am I wrong?
They're found in coral reef situations, yes. And it makes me wonder if there's an innate response in their heads that says, "Don't go near corals."
I don't know. That's another question we're going to have to investigate.
All I can do is tell you what I have seen with it.
Yes.
And it was I just thought it was really, really odd. It was an experiment that I did, and I was shocked.
Yeah, that is very interesting. We'll have to get some more info on that. And Holly's like, come on, I got more questions, but let me get a few more in. Sorry, Holly. Okay. Francis also caught the seahorse choking on an amphipod adult, aquatic depot amphipod adult. So I'm concerned what size to use when culturing them. So can they get so big that the seahorse can't eat them? That doesn't make much sense to me. But
how big is those combs that you've got are still fairly young and fairly small, so they probably cannot take the full adults.
Okay, so what should you culture faster?
If it's too big, though, because I've seen my little fry eat huge frozen mysis the size of their whole head, and if they can't they'll like and spit it out.
Yeah, combs are completely different though than combs. That's why I call them a seahorse of a different color. Their behavior and the things that they do is very different from what you would expect out of Erectus and Cuda and some of the others.
Right. That's why we appreciate you coming, Cheryl, because you have the combs, and hopefully Heather can jump in if she's in the audience. She might be busy this week. But what I was going to say, and this might be a really stupid question, but I've never used amphipods in a seahorse tank. I'm going to now because of Cheryl's excellent advice, and it's a great cheap treat to give them instead of trying to buy and culture live mysids, which are just to me very difficult. But I'm trying to remember, don't they isn't the reason that brine shrimp is the typical thing that we have to enrich, but is preferred for seahorses? Because don't amphipods have some sort of hard, not shell, but don't they have a hard thing?
The
Yeah, okay.
carpet, that's,
Everybody's looking at me like I'm stupid. But
we have that as stage 1 instar. After instar 2, they don't have the hard carcass anymore. And at stage 2, they've developed their full digestive system and they can start eating at that point.
Yeah.
The main reason we use brine shrimp as opposed to something like amphipods or copepods for when they're small is because of, first of all, the inordinate amount that's needed, and the fact that you cannot get cultures to produce any reasonable numbers in a reasonable amount of time. And with brine shrimp, you can take any amount you want of the cysts and hatch those out and have any number you want. But with cultures, when I was doing the amphipods, I had 3 cultures on them. Each one was 15 liters, and I kept rotating them, taking out, and there's no way I could have even sustained 1 pair of seahorses. Well, it was Reed-eye at that time. I couldn't have sustained 1 pair on amphipods without major other food on top of it.
But Holly did.
Pardon?
No, not with amphipods. This is my first
No, with
time.
cocoapods, with the babies.
Oh,
didn't
no,
you?
no, no,
Oh,
no.
you
Only for a
can
few
use
days. I
you can
Just for a
started
few days.
catching
cocoapods for
brine
fry.
shrimp. Yeah,
Okay,
I had
and
them for fry, and I used them for, throughout the first week while I was waiting for the brine shrimp to hatch.
No, okay, sorry, I got it wrong. And the question about the hard not shell, I don't know what it's called, but I was thinking of amphipods. I just thought, maybe I'm just thinking crazy. I thought I read something somewhere that they are harder to eat, but apparently not. So passing that. Okay.
If they get one that's hard to eat, they'll tear them apart just like my Reed-eye did to my cleaner shrimp.
That's true. And I've seen Lucy's seahorses tear anything apart. I mean, they'll take it and 2 seahorses rip it apart. Lord help me. Anyway, she's got some stallions. Okay, Francis asked, I'm unsure how many amphipods is considered enrichment in the display versus a full meal that's still in hiding. So as I think everybody's kind of said here, typically we're using amphipods as just a treat. You're still feeding the frozen mysids, but Cheryl, you know best. This person is dealing with combs, right? So what would you say? I know there's no number answer, but since they hide, I think that we're trying to get to the point, putting in enough.
I want to say that for probably 4 to 5 for each of the 2 combs at 1 feeding. But what we're wanting to do with those is not make it their primary diet. I'm using them to increase their lipid profile, the DHA and EPA, that the mysis shrimp is lacking. And of course, I'm also using enrichments along with it on the frozen food. But I would say I would start out with maybe 5. You've got 2, so there'd be 10 amphipods. And the thing with the amphipods is, I don't know what species that you got from Aquatic Depot, but depending on the species, there's a lot of different sizes, and you may have gotten some that were very large.
Mm.
Because even my biggest ones, I've got some, they were only about 3-inch erectus that were easily taking the full-grown amphipods that I culture.
Yeah, and the choking thing does scare me. If you can continue to see that,
I
definitely.
don't think it was choking. I
You don't
think
think
we
it was?
perceive it as choking. I think they're spitting it out.
That's very likely.
But it wasn't
Yes.
bothering them.
Right.
And if they still wanted, they could have hacked it and taken a piece
Gotten
of
it
it.
again. Right. No, I don't disagree. I'm an over worrier, just to let anybody know. So sometimes I say things because I over worry. But when the time that I saw my Reed-eye doing where it looks like they're choking or hacking and they keep, you don't need to see my mimic of it. But it ended up being a ciliates problem, actually, and they were having trouble
it can
eating
be.
because they had ciliates in the gill. So please don't over worry like me. If you've seen it one time, don't freak out. But if they continue to do it, come back and let us know, and we'll try to help.
And Francis,
Also,
she's worried about this nutrition
yes,
from the amphipods. There's all sorts of people that have never ever fed amphipods or any other
right, just
kind
frozen.
of enrichment, and they've done just fine.
Yeah.
Pardon me. So
Right.
just it's not a case of having to add a certain number. Just add whatever your culture is producing, just enough to keep your culture steady, and add anything that it's producing in excess. Add that to your tank, and it's all a plus for whatever you add. There isn't any number that somebody can tell you that is needed or not needed or whatever.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I want to say really quick too, just in case anybody watches this later or whatever, definitely listen to Ray's point, because we get experts in here like Cheryl Taylor and Ray, and Holly even is now a breeder, and Dan and we get experts in here that are telling you the absolute best way to do things if you just want to breed, or if you want to have seahorses live for 15 years and all this craziness. But if something's working for you, do what's working for you.
Yeah.
And you don't, I'm not as careful as Cheryl. I can tell you that now. I have benthic copepods that are bugging my seahorses in my tank because I did not cleanse the artemia that I added. Okay. So there's nothing wrong. If what you're doing is working, cool. We just give the sometimes I'm like,
Well,
Cheryl, you're crazy because she
well,
does so much.
What's happened is I've been at this long enough.
Yes.
I've made the mistakes myself. I'm the first person to admit it. If there's a mistake that can be made, I probably have made it at least once. And over the years, I found out prevention was a lot easier
Right.
than trying to clean up the problem.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree
And
with that more. So,
yeah,
but I'm just saying, I would never want someone new to be like, holy moly, I'm not doing any of this stuff. My seahorses are fine, but I don't feed amphipods. As Ray said, you don't have to. It's just an enrichment, a bonus, a treat, right? So, anyways, as for your question about the secret for peroxide in reef tanks with algae, that's a whole other show. Okay. And we actually talked about it on a show. If you go back through the Wine Wednesdays, the early ones probably wasn't very good, but we did talk about it. And it involves peroxide, microbubbling, skimmer for dang sure. Got to have a skimmer for that. And this whole process that took me like a month to rid my tank of this god awful hair algae. I can definitely talk about it another week or message me on the side, but try it. Take just a 5 milliliter syringe of peroxide, maybe 2 milliliters, just because you've never done it, and just literally spray directly on any nuisance algae in your tank. You will be shocked. Now the zoas will close. Some of the coral will be like, don't like it. They'll close up, but they're out the next day, and the algae will turn white like in seconds. It's awesome.
have you used that on bryopsis or on bubble algae? I'm just curious if it works if it's on. I know it works on green hair algae.
Yes, it does.
But I'm just curious if you've ever tried it on any of those.
I
Because
don't
think it's much harder to get rid of.
Okay, here's a little dirty secret. I like bubble algae, so I never tried to kill it. So I don't know. I think it's pretty, but that's a good question. We'll have to find the answer and come back to that. And one more question from Francis, but we could definitely talk further, but just give it a try. There's a regimen on Reef. I'm not going to remember the website. Coral, Elegant Coral. Elegant Coral has, and I'll try to link it when we're done, about the process for micro bubbling. I can't talk anymore today. But okay, so I'll try to link that when we're done for you. But Cheryl Taylor, would you consider the reef research to be outdated then? Should I remove my softies? I've seen my combs to hitch on the gorgonians, GSP branching, and leather toadstools, but if the reef research is outdated, I'd like to know.
I would keep the softies in there first of all, because mine never seemed the least bit bothered by them at all. They just didn't hitch to them. But also keep in mind that the seahorses I was working with were basically first generation from wild caught. And that makes a big difference.
Gotcha.
See,
And now I think Heather is in the comments. Yay! Because her tiger tails are doing amazing. And sorry, Holly, I promise I'm getting back to you in a second. It's just we've got all this interaction in the audience. It's cool.
I see what's happening.
No, that's
But,
okay. They're answering my questions.
Oh, okay, good. Well, Francis said for my situation,
still
well, you guys
have
can
more.
read it. I need to quit reading the whole comment, but basically the reason that the question keeps being asked is she's just unsure. Like, I think they've kind of said it already, but I don't think there is an actual answer. Like Ray was saying, as long as you're feeding the frozen mysis as the true meal, they're getting what they need. And as Cheryl said, if you add amphipods that have snacked on TDO or whatever, then that's just like a bonus, to a boost to their lipids, to their health, to their immunity. But it's not required. So I don't think there's like, you have to add 3, or a seahorse has to eat 3 in order to have this boost. It's just not there. I don't think there's an answer like that. So I wouldn't add so much that they become a nuisance, like these damn Cocoapods in my tank. And thank you to whoever just subscribed. But go ahead, Cheryl. What were you saying?
Well, the thing is, my amphipod cultures are separate. They're in a separate tank. And so I know exactly how much I'm feeding each time I feed. Yeah, I count the little buggers. But it's one of those things where if you just dump them in the tank, you're not going to see them. The only way you're going to, because they're not going to come out in the daylight unless they've got a darn good reason. They're going to be in hiding.
Yep.
And the only way that I know what my population looks like is I sit there and I feed them with a light on them, and they can't resist coming out to eat. And that's how I can keep track of what my culture is doing.
I know Lucy uses that with dwarf seahorses in Artemia, keeping them in one spot so the dwarfs don't have to hunt for them. But I mean, I do think too that it's really good for seahorses to hunt. You know, we've got they kind of, it gives them exercise. You know, that's why a lot of people choose to, instead of target feeding, they broadcast feed, because I think Cheryl said that repeatedly. She wants her guys to get their exercise getting their food. And Seahorse Corner, go ahead, Cheryl.
They need to move around. They hitch in the wild, but they're also going to be swimming to different areas. Their courtship, the whole 9 yards. They're going to be hunting food. If the food sources get low, they're going to move to another area. And if we make it too easy all the time, they're just going to get fat and lazy.
Right. Which, if they're your pride breeders, you know, they get spoiled anyways. But the final question was, so
why I
there's
like broadcast feeding as opposed to dish.
Right, exactly. And the final question from Francis so far was, so there's no problem with overfeeding amphipods. They can't add, like, don't they add to the organics in the tank? Ray, you always talk about cleanup crew, how they're good, but they're pooping. So they're adding to the...
What, I can add the amphipods.
They're not going to really add to it.
Yeah, I can add the amphipods after I feed them some frozen. And normally the seahorses, I'd have leftover frozen in the morning. When I put amphipods in the tank, there's no frozen. There's no, the tank, the bottom of the tank is spotless because the amphipods are picking it up.
Gotcha. Okay, Holly, now
Let's go back to one other
yes, go ahead.
that the Francis was talking about, and that's with the hair algae.
Yes.
When you're talking hair algae and the bubble algae and that, I find it very frustrating to try to explain to people this stuff cannot grow if it doesn't have food. The reason it has food is you are putting food into the tank.
Well, wait. I'll let you finish. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. You're putting food into the tank. Some of it's being consumed, some of it isn't. When that is consumed, the feces are still producing more nutrient. So it's an endless chain going down to the smallest microcosms in the tank. The number one thing, though, is you're putting stuff in. Unless you have a way to take it out, then it's still there. And then the algae are going to feed on it. So you need to do things like frequent cleaning of your filtration pads and everything. You've got to learn not to overfeed, learn how to find the right amount of feed at a time so that you're not putting that excess in, and learn how to properly clean your tank so that stuff that you can't see, you're able to find a way to locate it and get it out of the tank. Then you don't have to worry about using peroxide to get rid of it.
Truth. Okay, and here was what I was going to say when I rudely interrupted. I apologize. Because Ray's not wrong, especially in a seahorse tank. Like if you don't have any rock and stuff like that, then absolutely. If you're seeing nuisance algae, then that means your input of organics is not being taken out by your output, meaning you need a better skimmer. You need to do more water changes. Everything he just said, I agree with. However, in a reef tank, if you've got coral and you've got rock, on my reef tank, I had a rock, I had nuisance algae, and I promise, do this topic on another week, talking about how I got rid of it finally using the elegant coral method. But bottom line was, I couldn't figure it out. I was like, Cruz Arias was my reef mentor, whereas Seahorse Source was my seahorse mentor. But anyways, Cruz was like, I was like, Cruz, I don't understand. Like, I'm barely feeding these dang fish. I'm like not doing a good job towards my fish. And I'm doing crazy water changes, and it just seems to be feeding the algae. And what I ended up figuring out was that I had a rock that was leaching phosphate. You can watch my nuisance algae. I'll try to link it when we're done. But I talk about it and how when you have a rock that's leaching phosphate, it's just endless, and you can do whatever you want. It's not going to matter until you get all the phosphate out of that rock. And so I'm just making that clear, because if you're doing everything you can do and you have some oversized skimmer and something's still not going right, and the algae seems to be growing on one rock mainly, might want to think about that and test phosphate. But in a seahorse tank, you typically don't have that much rock and you don't have the other stuff. So I was just making that point. I'll link it when we're done.
The thing is with green hair algae, I'll be honest. If I get some green hair algae in a tank that's only been set up for a short period of time, even though it's cycled, I don't even sweat it. It's like, because what it's doing, it's part of, everybody calls it new tank syndrome. And I found, let it grow for a little while. One of two things are going to happen. It's either going to slowly die back, or if it's really bugging you, manually renew, but do a couple water changes, and it probably won't come back.
Fantastic point. Actually, Lori Johnson, whom I know is sitting happy somewhere in heaven. We miss her terribly, but she actually shared with me a fantastic article regarding reef tanks. There's kind of a difference when you're talking reef tanks or a seahorse tank that has coral versus, a tank that's literally no rock and all ornaments and seahorses, and you have other media. But in a reef tank, yeah, exactly what Cheryl said. This article that Lori shared with me basically went through the fact that there is 3 stages of the nitrogen cycle, right? Ammonia, nitrite, nitrates. And then there's 3 stages of the algae cycle, red, brown, green, brown, red. So I can't remember. I'll link it when we're done. I'm taking notes here on what I got to link when we're done. And if you want to see the links, they'll be on YouTube probably only. But, definitely there's a cycle of algae that happens in a new tank with rock and a reef. Maybe not a seahorse tank, just trying to make the comparison. But when I see it at first, the red, brown, green, I ignore it. This reef tank had been up for over a year, and it was still shooting out this awful, god-awful green hair algae that was just, you couldn't even pick it off the rocks. It was so carpeted. And that's why I use the peroxide, which I will cover on another week. There's a couple more questions in the comments, but Holly, I want to give you a chance because we're running over an hour already, and I haven't let you ask your questions. So you have the floor for a moment. I'll ask the rest of the questions in the comments in a minute.
I had a couple more on the amphipods about enriching. Like if I'm going to enrich them before I feed, and I'm using the ocean rider enrichment like you do, Cheryl, how long should I enrich? Like if I'm going to pull a few amphipods and put them in a separate container to enrich them, how long do they need to be in there to enrich, you think?
Well, I feed them. I feed them the TDO and the enriched brine, mysis shrimp every day. So I'm not.
You're not giving them just the enrichment.
I'm not just giving them the enrichment. I'm giving them the enriched food.
Do you know, Ray, how long to enrich an amphipod? Like if you're going to enrich it with something, how long does it take for them to?
Normally it takes.
I would think that it would be the same as brine shrimp, would it not?
I know the brine shrimp, the directions say half an hour, which doesn't seem that long to me, but
no. And Dan always says enrich for 12 hours or 24.
A couple hours at least.
A couple hours.
I was going to say, Dan.
And a full day if they're Napoli.
Right, and Dan has said before, I think his method, which is in the file section of Seahorse Sources group, is like 24 hours. So, yeah, but it's a different product. Cheryl, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because the brine shrimp, yeah, I do when I'm enriching them, the feed for the brine shrimp, it's like 2 12-hour sessions, I think is what it is. But on the directions for the ocean rider enrichment, it says 30 minutes. But I've always kind of is that really long enough, or is it a different, because it's a different product, or?
But wait, are they talking about enrichment on frozen foods or
no,
for mysis?
For live.
Oh,
yeah, yeah. So I was wondering about that.
See, my thing is, I'm constantly enriching the live food because I'm feeding them the stuff that they would normally be enriched with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but see, I don't want to feed them that enrichment because it costs a fortune. I'll be feeding them other stuff, but I might want to enrich them, like we were saying, maybe a few hours or something before I feed the seahorses. I don't want the ocean rider enrichment to be food for the amphipods. I just want it to be something I give them before I feed them to the seahorses. Because it costs a fortune.
I always throw out too much, and I measure out how much I put in the tank for seahorses, and then whatever I overdid goes to
then it goes to them. That's a good idea. I could probably give them the leftovers from this because it makes the water red. I could probably give them that red water and that'd probably be okay.
And don't forget that when I was not rinsing that enrichment off of frozen foods, my freaking tank turned orange.
You must have used a lot. Had that happened yet? But I use a seafood spoon to enrich. So it's like a tiny amount. Anyway,
after Cheryl's help, I started rinsing it, and now I don't have that problem. Sorry, go ahead.
Another question is about how long does it take the amphipods to reproduce and grow a culture?
Ray had to step away and feed the apps. Go ahead, Cheryl.
It depends on how many hours you're willing to spend fishing all the newborns out of your filter socks.
Well, if I'm not putting them in the tank, they have their own bin, and all I've got in there is an air stone, so nobody's going anywhere in there.
Yeah, but I'm talking even in the tanks.
More. How long does it take them?
Even when you're putting them in as food, some of them are going to make their way into the filter sock. And when you pull that filter sock out, you're still going to have tiny baby amphipods in there.
Right, but no, I think Holly's question is great, and if we don't get an answer tonight, this would be a great question for Chad because he knows all about the pods and the amphipods. But do you know, Cheryl? Because I definitely do not know how long it takes for like a culture to how long you should expect.
Or how long is their reproduction cycle? Like how long?
Yes.
Technically, the reason we enrich food is that mysis shrimp lacks the lipid profile essential for saltwater fish or saltwater organisms.
Right, of course.
That is the purpose of enriching, and that it can also be a vitamin supplement. But it's one of those things where amphipods, because they're already a saltwater species, have the necessary lipid profile to make them a good source of food.
Just
So
not
I
enough to be a
don't
full meal,
even
but
have to
just
worry
not.
about enriching them then. Like I should really.
I'm
even
sorry.
think-
Okay, we were talking over each other. So Holly just asked, so you don't really have to actually enrich amphipods. They already have what the seahorse needs, correct?
Right. When you're
Okay.
enriching, what you're enriching with them doing is just improving, is adding to the nutritional profile of the organism prior to it being consumed.
However, they should still not be used as the only source of food because it's just not enough. You'd have to have so many. And so back to now that Ray's back,
My other
Holly's.
question, yeah.
Wait. I wanted to ask your question again because we never really got an answer, and then I'll shut up, Holly. Sorry. But Ray, do you know how long it takes, how long the reproduction cycle of an amphipod is? Like if you're not seeing new amphipods within this amount of time, something's wrong or whatever.
No, I honestly don't know what the time
Okay.
is. I just know they don't produce in great numbers, and they do take quite a while to grow. Even the mysis shrimp. The mysis shrimp, I used to have to keep them, any that were hatched or any that were born in 1 week, I kept them in one 10-gallon tank. And then the ones that were born in a week before that in a 10-gallon tank, and so on, back and forth, because 2-week-olds will eat 1-week-old.
Right, they prey.
Same thing
Right.
with amphipods. That's why you need space for them for the various sizes to be able to hide and not be attacked by the larger ones.
Rubble rock.
Gotcha. So
But
they'll eat each other.
As far as
Sounds like.
the actual length of their cycle to adult, no, I don't know.
We got to get Chad in here to answer these questions, but go
You
ahead.
could
Sorry.
probably Google it and find an answer.
But we'll get Chad in here. Go ahead, Holly, because there's a couple more questions in the comment section, but I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, that was it. I was going to ask
Oh.
that. I was going to ask
Okay.
Ray because he was on when I asked the question.
Okay, well, a couple of side questions then from Francis. And Francis, just keep coming back, babe. We will make sure to get these questions answered. If we don't have an answer, that's the point. We'll get it. You know what I mean? So next question was, when should we feed thawed mysis shrimp? How much should we thaw per meal? If they're sitting at a feeding station for over an hour, still eating and inspecting the remainder of the cube, I feed every 3 hours. My combs aren't huge eaters. Cheryl.
I would not let them go more than about 20 minutes at the absolute. These are youngsters though, so I'm going to say, give them 20 minutes, pull the food, because you don't want that stuff sitting in there and starting to. Plus the fact they're looking at it going, well, I'm awful full, but I just ate a big steak and I'm not just.
They
Not
just
really
had
feeling-
amphipods.
Huh?
They just had amphipods.
Right. No, but I
They're
totally agree
Nice.
with what Cheryl's saying. The typical, like the way I figure out how much to feed my seahorses, which I learned from Seahorse Source, is to add, what I think they might want, pay attention, come back in 10 minutes, because sometimes like new seahorses won't eat if you're face up in the tank.
Yeah.
I'll try to link that video. I made a video about that. But anyways, I back up, come back in 10 minutes. If there's anything left, I feed less the next time. If it's all gone, I might try to feed more the next time. But 10 minutes is usually the cutoff, but I'm talking erectus.
Yeah.
Cheryl knows more about tiger tails.
Yeah.
So, and I'm curious what Heather thinks too in the audience. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Combs are very slow, methodical feeders. They have a very, very different feeding behavior from erectus. And that's something makes them. That's why I like the bare bottom tank, particularly with combs, because I can see how much they're eating. Did we lose Kelly?
No, I'm sorry. My kids keep trying to talk to me. I'm sorry. My kids keep trying to talk to me. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I can see exactly how much they've eaten. And if they're just kind of sitting there kind of going, yeah, I'll get around to it tomorrow, I'm going to siphon out the food and I'll back off. And I may even give them an extra hour between each feedings to build up a bit more of an appetite. But they're a whole different world.
Yep, I remember with my Barbori, I was calling Seahorse Source saying, "What's wrong with these seahorses? They won't eat."
Yeah.
They're throwing the food in. And he said, "Well, they're different." And basically, I had to turkey baster feed my Barbori because they wouldn't eat it if it was on the ground. I had to, put one piece in it at a time. It was a pain, but man, I love those seahorses. They were beautiful. I loved them. And Ray, you didn't have that experience with Barbori, did you?
No, mine fed. When I tried dish feeding them, no, out of the 8, there was only 2 or 3 of them. I don't remember exactly now. 2 or 3 of them that would eat out of the dish, and the rest of them had no interest. Most of them wanted the broadcast feeding.
Right. They like to hunt. And I would just say try different things because you definitely don't want to leave food in there for an hour. That's really not a good thing. If they accidentally eat a piece later because it's sitting there and it's covered in bacteria from sitting there, not a good thing. But, like I said,
But
with
the
the
main thing,
Barbori,
though, by feeding them too much, though, you're pushing the food through that rudimentary digestive tract. They're not going to get the proper nutrients out of it. And there's a lot of nutrients in the feces anyway, but you're going to have a lot more in the feces if you're pushing it through their digestive tract too fast. Then that feces, then with the higher nutrient level, that's going to fuel your nuisance algae problems.
So basically what you're saying is if they're not eating very much as this person is feeding every 3 hours, maybe feed like only 4 times a day.
Well,
No, if she can feed 3 times a day and doesn't mind doing it, I would still do it, but just feed less.
No, I'm saying she's feeding every 3 hours.
Yeah, I don't care. Like I fed more than every 3 hours when I was raising fry. But the faster that, or the more often you feed and just feeding what they need, the faster they're going to grow. They're going to be healthier and build up their immune systems. They're going to be far less likely to come down with a problem because their bodies are going to be more resistant to the bacteria that are going to cause the problems. That's assuming you keep the bacteria levels reasonable.
Well, and I would also say take note of what Ray said about picky. And I know my Barbori would not have gone to a feeding station. We're very lucky with Erectus. I don't know tiger tails. I've never kept them, unfortunately. I'm jealous as heck, by the way, of you and Cheryl and Heather. But yeah, my Barbori would never have. They would have shunned me, stuck their little noses up or snouts up, and told me to kiss it. They would not have gone to a feeding station. So maybe
my abs won't either.
Yeah, maybe try either. Sorry guys, I keep forgetting to turn myself back on. Apologies. Here I am. Maybe. Hi. Okay, so yeah, I would say try broadcast feeding, or I will link that video when we're done, where I had special needs seahorses that needed me to turkey baste one piece at a time. It was so much fun. But when you love the seahorse, it doesn't matter. Cheryl, do tiger tails, they eat slower, but do they like broadcast, or what's the?
Well, first of all, a lot of the seahorses combs we're seeing, they're still not that far removed from the wild. But what we used to see, and several people messaged me kind of in a blind panic that got some combs, because they would eat the frozen, and as soon as they'd finished the frozen, and anytime there wasn't live or frozen in the tank, they were going through the rocks. That they had that long snout and that long narrow body, and they would literally, they looked like hummingbirds searching every hole in the rocks. And this would go on all day, and they'd only take a break from that when they were actually eating frozen. And that was about early on, and that I remember that. I'm going back to 2008, 2009. And they definitely have they're very different.
I think you need to feed whichever way is most convenient for you that they will accept.
Yes.
Okay, and just an FYI update. Dan is extremely busy, seahorses, but he did say don't use it on, and I did just say pods. I didn't say amphipods. I'm sorry. We'll ask him in person for the exacts, but He said, don't use peroxide on them. The dose affected to kill the bacteria will do it sorry. The dose effective to kill the bacteria will do in the pods. But he may have been talking cocoapods, so we'll get some clarification on that. And back to that rinsing question, I rinse all foods, even live, frozen. It doesn't matter. I rinse everything now. And I am curious. We got to get better answers on the peroxide for amphipods because, again, if I hadn't added damn Artemia, if I had used peroxide on the adult Artemia I bought from the store, I probably would not have now these menthic dickhead, excuse my language, but cocoapods. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I'm going to get YouTube slapped. But anyways.
I do remember that was what Dan told me. Yeah. And it was about the cocoapods. He said the peroxide would kill the cocoapods.
Right. And I'm going to ask him right now.
I was talking specifically about cocoapods at the time. So I don't know.
They probably wouldn't kill those nasty tiger pods.
Okay. Next question. Is there, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but is there a recommended salt brand mix? Trying to lower my phosphates due to algae, but I think the salt mix has added nutrients for coral growth. And I'm curious to you guys' answer because I asked this myself a few weeks ago because when I was mixing water, I would always get this slimy white substance, which we figured out because my pump was too large and like putting off heat, it was warming the water, attracting, making bacteria grow more quickly. And I was leaving it too long. And part of it was calcium deposit, but part of it was bacteria growing. So guys, what salt mix do you use? And can it add phosphates?
I'll go first, I guess.
Everybody's like, I'm not telling.
I just use Instant Ocean. I use 2 types. My display tank has live rock in it. So I use the orange one, which is called Reef crystals, because I think it does have, a little more minerals, for the coralline algae and corals and things like that. I also use the purple one for the grow out tank, which has no rock or coral in it. But I recently got a great deal on the Reef crystals, were cheaper than the purple one. They were on sale. So I got a couple buckets of that and I'm going to start using it in the grow out tank for a little while. I've used both in both tanks and I can't really tell a difference, honestly. I use the normal purple stuff to top off my display tank that has the live rock in it. And I don't think it's changed anything really. So I don't know that it's actually doing anything that you use the Reef crystals. I don't know for sure. I haven't noticed.
And I think the Reef crystals actually says on the bag, no phosphates, no nitrates included, doesn't it?
Well, I've got a lot of friends that are hardcore raising aquaporas and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really hardcore reefers. And I'll tell you right up front, every one of those jokers have dosing pumps, and they're dosing specific chemicals for coral growth, coral to enhance coloration, the whole 9 yards. And as far as I can tell, it doesn't really matter which salt mix you get, depending on what you're propagating, it has to be suitable for that organism. And,
interesting.
And
go ahead.
I mean, most of them, some of them use the Reef crystals, some of them use Fritz, some of them use Instant Ocean. They all use different salt mixes. The common ground here is that the caulk, the alk, and all the other stuff that they're dosing with dosing pumps into their tanks.
I was just going to say
coral growth.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I personally, and I'm going to let you talk too, Ray. I talk too much. Sorry. But I personally like to know what I'm adding to my tank. Like in my Reef, I dosed Reef Grow, the whole line of products, right? We can talk about that later. but I'm just saying, even boron, anything, I like to know what I was adding, so I don't want it in my salt. It'd be interesting to see if your phosphates went down by using a different salt. I think that most of them promise no phosphates and nitrates, but I personally use the purple Instant Ocean. And I do like what was the salt you just mentioned, Cheryl?
The Fritz
Fritz.
or
I do like Fritz salt. I really like Fritz salt in my Reef. I never used it in my Seahorse tank. So it does depend on your goals. But I personally, I like using the basic. And then if I see something not doing well, I'll add something, right? Like I'll research it and realize, oh, in my macro tank, I need more iron. I add iron. Ray, what's your thoughts?
Well,
Because we
I've
have a
used
couple more
Instant
questions we got to get
Ocean
through.
since January of '94.
Instant
Used it in
Ocean?
all my Reef tanks. And so, of course, when I started salt water many years later, then I used it in their tanks too. Now, the caveat is that I'm cheap. And so 2 decades ago, I got together messaging with Randy Holmes Farley,
Oh, yeah.
and I took the recipe from Frank. Oh, I can't think of the fellow's name now. In Chemical Oceanography, I think it was the magazine. Frank Malero had published a formula there for making homemade salt water.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did is I took the 4 primary salts that were used to make that, and I made up my formula from that, and then went over it with Randy Holmes Farley. He's the chemist guru, and so he figured, well, we're not using pure chemicals for these 4, because one is, first of all, it's sodium chloride water softener salt without any additives. So that's bound to have a bit of impurities in it. There's Epsom salts, there's sodium sulfate, and what's the other one? My mind isn't working here right now. But anyway, he figured there's a lot of the trace elements that get added in Frank's recipe that I'm putting in from not using pure chemicals. And so I started making it that way. And I started at first with just my fish only tanks, mixing it half and half. And then when everything went well for a long time, then I started mixing 75 Instant Ocean with 25 Reef, and eventually went to 50-50 mix on that as well, on the Reef tanks as well. With the Seahorses, I've done the same thing. It's 50-50 all the way, and I haven't had a problem with it.
Amazing answer. There's no way in hell that I'm making my own salt. So, Ray, you're amazing. But just for anybody out there that's like, what? No, me neither. Well, yes. If you can, Ray, and we need you to write up your when you have time. We need to write up on your detailed salt making.
It's on my website.
Okay.
The formula's on the website.
I will link that when we're done too. But if you don't have time to do that, please don't feel bad. Okay, we got a couple more questions, guys. I'm sorry, but we've already been going an hour and a half. The wine's almost gone, so we got to hurry up because we got to get through the questions. So if I'm being rude, just tell me to shut up. But my fish store told me I can, said, my fish store told me I can feed frozen plankton to my seahorses in between frozen mysis feeding. Thoughts, guys?
If they'll eat it.
If they'll eat it.
If anything, I would try the krill.
Yep. I was going to say, I've tried different things, and certain seahorses will eat it. Yep. Certain will not. I would use the same 10-minute. If they don't eat it, get it out kind of thing. Now, live plankton, I know Dan collected live plankton for fry, but for seahorses, I think plankton would be pretty, well, unless you're talking krill. I know that's okay. I got off topic. Sorry.
Like the krill that's come out now that's a decent size for seahorses.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I would say, Maria, too, that I think that what any store or person is telling you is that as Cheryl was explaining earlier, mysis shrimp, which is the main frozen feed of seahorses, which comes to our next question from Francis, doesn't have exactly the best, everything they need to be the best that they can be, right? So actually, I'm just going to ask the next question, but I will just say you can easily feed frozen mysids and mysis shrimps, excuse me, and that's it. And your seahorses will be fine. They will breed. They will everything. What we're talking about here is if you want to be like, if you want to become a real breeder, like a commercial breeder, or if you just really want to do the best you can do all of these other things like amphipods and enrichments and everything, but you don't have to. So, but with, if your store tells you that you can do that, try it, come back, let us know if it works, and we'll go from there.
Don't just try it first. Ask people that know for sure.
Well, they're asking you and you don't know.
Not everybody can be on here, but
I know.
people need to
What
know
is
that
it?
these
The
stores
Pacific
are selling
Grill?
these things. They think they know something about what they're selling. When it comes to seahorses, there are very, very few that know anything about seahorses and their needs.
Very
And
true.
So whatever they tell you, listen to it and then check it out before you accept it as fact.
You're not
See,
wrong, Ray, and that's
Dan
the
has
thing.
said he's known people that have had their seahorses frozen mysis shrimp forever and
Yep.
had no enrichment and had them for years and years.
And that's why I, first of all, always say, guys, we're telling you how to do better for your seahorses, but you're fine if you're not doing these things. We're just telling you the best, and you can always do less. And as far as what Ray just said, totally agree. And that's why, I've kept seahorses for quite a few years, but I depend on these people that are surrounding me in this little box right now, and Seahorse Source. And so if I don't know an answer, like I didn't earlier, I'm going to be honest and say, I'm not sure. We will find out and tell you next week or the week after.
Well,
But
it's like years ago, I tried krill because I thought it would be a good supplement. The problem back then is that all we could get were these huge krill that had a very, very tough shell. And I would sit there and have to
maybe that's what I was thinking.
just kind of like cleaning shrimp, completely clean them, then chop them up to make them bite size. And it'd take me 15, 20 minutes 4 times a day at least to prepare the krill for them. And it was like, I was working 10.5-hour days back then.
Yep.
And it was just, it got to the point that it wasn't feasible.
Yep. So a lot of these things that maybe a store tells you, if they're not experts in seahorses, maybe they don't really know. And I still think, as Ray said, check it out. Ask people like on Wine Wednesday, and I'll follow up and try to get a better answer for next week. But
Ask
if
on
you do,
Seahorse Source and
ask on Seahorse Sources group on Facebook. Absolutely. That's where even more experts are. And then if you do try something, just make sure you're not allowing it to sit and add to the organics of the tank or, decay or not decay. That's not the word. Anyways, you get my
when we were
point.
talking about the other foods, so like the plankton and so on, and it's really weird that these abs that I have are the largest of the 7 species that I've grown. They will not eat anything other than Hikari mysis.
Wow.
Hikari has a large mysis, they won't touch it.
Yeah.
Yep.
The PE mysis, they won't touch it. The krill, they won't touch
How
it.
funny. How funny.
You give them that, and yet I've had small reed eye that would sit and chomp on the biggest chunks that they could get.
Yep.
And with these big abs, for some reason, I don't know. And
They're not only
from Australia, I don't know.
Not only does it matter the species, but it's just the individual seahorse. As I mentioned earlier, Lucy talks about she can't add freaking peppermint shrimp to some of her seahorse tanks because the seahorses will tear them up. And I'm like, my seahorses don't even look twice at a peppermint shrimp. I mean, there's no way. And she's got these, not vicious, but vivacious, that's a better word, like seahorses that will just tear them apart. And I'm like, mine sit there and look at me like, where's my dinner, Mom? I want my frozen stuff. So I think it just depends. And just real quick, Francis said, to clarify, is mysis shrimp adequate to feed them? And I think we've already answered that, but obviously, but he did, or she did ask, would frozen brackish mysis shrimp be a better, more suitable alternative? And I know that PE mysis is, no, am I,
He is
which one?
freshwater. Hikari is brackish.
Okay, so maybe try Hikari. And I think PE mysis is great too, by the way. I mean, my seahorses love it, and they do a lot of things to make sure it's.
The only problem is the nutrient they add to it, because it's freshwater. They do add nutrient to it, and a lot of that washes off in your tank.
Right, and so we can talk more about that in the future for sure. I'm trying to get through all these, but I would just say, if you're maybe throw in some Hikari if you can. I'll leave it there. Okay, so go ahead, Cheryl.
I was going to say, the thing is, we have learned so much in the last 17 years or so. So many things have changed in this hobby, and it's still continuous changes. And as we learn more, I mean, when I first got seahorses, they were wild caught, and I was lucky to keep them alive for 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, if I lose a seahorse that's not at least 9 or 10 plus years old, I'm going to feel really bad because I, as their keeper, did something wrong.
But don't you feel bad, because especially if you're new, just putting that out there.
Get there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed.
Cheryl's been doing this for 30 years. So go ahead. Sorry, Cheryl.
Yeah, we lost a lot in the years in between, didn't we?
Exactly. You guys did the hard work for us. And I think we kind of answered this too, but in speaking of what Cheryl just said, how much things have changed, Ray's answer to the question from Fashion Girl 173, do any of you enrich frozen mysis shrimp? And Ray and also Seahorse Source will say, don't recommend it because most of the enrichment is going to wash off. However, Holly, Cheryl, and I are now enriching frozen mysis. So what changed, Cheryl? Why did you think that?
I got sent the enrichment for free, and I figured, well, what the heck? Let's
love it.
The thing is, if I don't experiment, we're never. If I don't, and other people don't, we'll never move forward. We'll never improve what we're doing. And so it's worth it to me to say, okay, I'm going to take a look at this.
Yep.
And at this point, I'm seeing a very rapid growth rate, very high level of energy. The young females will start getting really fat and plump, and all of a sudden they'll shoot up and get an elongate, and then they look like little skinny seahorses. Then they get fat again.
Yep.
And I'm laughing because I've never seen the seahorses grow this fast.
So I guess my answer, in addition to hers, would be I never enriched frozen foods because, as Ray pointed out and Dan has said forever, half of it washes off in the food. And I'm proof of that because when I followed Cheryl's lead but didn't know what the heck I was doing, I was dumping this Ocean Rider. What's it even called? I can't remember. The red.
Vibrant. It's vibrant.
Vibrance. So I kind of followed Cheryl's lead because she talked so highly of these seahorses in this enrichment that I went and did it. But I was soaking the frozen food in this Vibrance, and it would turn it bright red. I was also feeding it to live feed so that I gave them as treats. But the frozen feed, I would then put it in the tank, and it literally not only shot up the organics because it was coming off in the water, you could see it, but when I would do my water changes, and this isn't the 40-gallon all-in-one, so there's not, the water that I would want to be there because I'm experimenting with a smaller tank, and the pumps would be caked with this orange, it looked like bacteria or
You're
gunk.
using way too much.
Right. No, we had this discussion. You taught me, but that's what I'm saying. So, like, if you're gonna do an enrichment, keep in mind that it can mess you up because dummy here showed you. And bottom line is, if you use the enrichment, soak it in it, let it soak up what it can, but then rinse it in a net to make sure none of the extra particles are going to come off in the water. You're still getting something, and that's what's worked for me. I will also say I only do it like so I feed 3 times a day. I only soak the food maybe once a day, once every couple days. I do not do it every time.
Once a
So-
week,
I do
probably not.
mine every morning. I started using the Vibrance also because Cheryl was using it and liked it. So
It's all Cheryl's fault.
I tried some, and honestly, I haven't really noticed a difference other than I think Dandy, who we've talked about before, that has some kind of neurological difficulties.
Yeah.
I think he's gotten a little more active since I started using it. And I don't know if it has to do with that or something else. It's been, I want to say 3 months now. I think I've been using the Vibrance. But in my juveniles, I haven't noticed any difference in them from it. And the other adult seahorses, I can't say that I have. But
Yeah.
but I don't know if it's doing something for them that I can't see.
Right.
You,
And
you
Just
know?
I
a
would-
caveat to Cheryl's remarks earlier about experimenting. Um, I worry about too many people thinking the same way. And I think it should be noted that if you're going to experiment, you need to know a lot about the hobby to begin with. If you experiment without knowing as much as what some of us have learned over many years, then you may be costing seahorses their lives needlessly.
Yes.
So there's that to it. Now, the other thing too, and it comes up with what Holly was saying here. Holly doesn't see quite the same difference. Well, the other thing is also that Cheryl bought Seahorse now from a spot that she doesn't normally buy from. So there might be something in the fact that the breeding stock that these seahorses came from had better genetic characteristics, so that these particular ones may be doing better than what she normally experienced. And it may not be all due to the vibrance that you're using.
Exactly.
Truth. Yeah, that's why I couldn't agree more, Ray. That's why I constantly say, guys, we're telling you what we're doing, but if you're new to keeping seahorses, you do not have to do all of this. You can literally follow your breeder's instruction or wherever you bought the seahorses and feed frozen mysis, and we just cover, like, if you come and you ask a question, we're going to answer it. We'll all have different answers, and nobody's wrong. And we'll all have, try to help you if you have a problem, for sure. In fact, Maria was saying she's so excited to join us because she's new to keeping seahorses and has an erectus. He is my baby. Cannot wait to add more once my fish store has more available. So you only have one. I'm curious, Maria, how that's going, because typically, has anybody else kept one seahorse?
Years and years. My first seahorse, I only had one, I want to say, and that was 30 years ago.
Well, I personally,
I didn't know how to take care of it. Well, the store didn't know how to take care of
But you're
them.
only 29, Holly.
It didn't go well.
What'd you say, Ray?
I said, you're only 29.
Yeah,
Oh,
Holly,
right.
come on.
Yeah.
But no, and I'll say,
But my first seahorses, they told me use table salt, mix it in water until it tastes salty, and then you can
Lord,
put seahorses in it.
Oh Lord. Well, all I would say too is that my best advice until I get the website Seahorse Whisperer up, my best advice would be to join Seahorse Sources group on Facebook. Check the files section, because while I completely supporting local stores, and I love that you got your seahorse from your local store, Sometimes they, as Ray was saying earlier, sometimes they don't know as much about seahorses as they do the rest of the fish that they're caring for. So there's all these files in the group that will be on the website that really walk you through the basics, what you need, if there's a problem, and as Cheryl said earlier, when you set up right and you know what to look for, and then you avoid a lot of problems that they made. We let them make the mistakes long ago, and we get to benefit from captive bred seahorses that eat frozen, that we don't have to medicate them to get rid of all the ocean stuff. And so I'm so happy to have you join us. Please keep joining us. Any questions, please put them out there. But don't ever get scared by some of the things we talk about. Sometimes this Cheryl and Ray pros go into all this detailed stuff, and you're like, what? Right.
Hey,
I'm just
real quick. When my first seahorse, when I got older, that was after the salt incident, was wild caught male that was in our local fish store. And the collector actually was Eliza's collector, and he brought them back up from Florida. So they were actually in decent shape. I took a male home. A week later, my sons convinced me the seahorse was lonely.
right.
So I went back and bought a female. I didn't know the difference then. I didn't know who was who. Next thing I know, I've got baby seahorses. And we hear it all the time. Well, I'm having trouble raising them. It took me almost 2 years to truly have success raising Erectus fry.
And I love when you say that, Cheryl. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm dead serious about that. 2 years of beating my head against the wall.
Yep.
And finally, one day it started to click. And that's when I was finally able to raise some of the fry to adults. And they went on to produce fry.
Well, and thank you so much,
guys. I've been able to raise them my first time around.
Exactly. You're not only making progress by sharing the information, but also, I appreciate you saying that, Cheryl, because a lot of times I just worry that people watch the show and are like, oh gosh, I'm not doing that. Am I messing up? And, Ray's got really strict feeding rules. And, we talk about, there's a big difference if you're just trying to keep a pair of seahorses, right? Versus trying to breed. Huge difference in what you're trying to accomplish and what you need to do. So we appreciate and love that you experts or experienced folks come and share, but don't ever feel like you're doing something wrong. Okay, we got a few more questions.
For people that are buying from stores.
Yes, go ahead.
One indication you can look for to see if they know anything at all, see what tank system they are in. If they have systems set up and they're tied into a main some type of thing, or if the seahorse tank is completely separate system. If the tank the seahorses are in are connected in any way to water from any of the other fish that they have, they don't know anything about seahorses. Well, if they don't know anything, it's just luck that they might know certain things about them.
Well,
if you want to buy seahorses that haven't been in contact with any of these other fish, because it increases the odds of them having problems down the road. Not bacterial problems, but parasitic problems of some kind.
Truth for sure, but I will say that I sold my captive bred seahorses to a store in my area in Indianapolis. So, and they actually asked me and I helped them figure out to keep them in a separate system. So if you're Maria, I'm so glad your seahorse is doing great. And I was going to say earlier too, I had a seahorse, a male seahorse that was just a jerk. He was a jerk. He was constantly snicking other seahorses. He didn't like anybody. He just didn't want to be around anybody. And he got his own tank. And then eventually I ended up with 2 more jerks and it became a bachelor pad. Okay. But I'm just saying, if your seahorse is doing well, bravo. Okay, go Cheryl, and then I got to go to the next question.
One of the things is an FYI of caution. Um, I have seen 2.5-inch tiger tail seahorses being sold as dwarf seahorses in fish
Right.
stores.
Yeah.
I have seen wild caught erectus being sold as captive bred.
Yep.
I have. I mean, I won't go and say anymore because most fish stores do not have the knowledge of seahorses to even truly know what they've got. There are
Okay.
exceptions.
Okay, so here's my tips for that real quick because we have to move forward. I know Ray's like, I got to get out of this chair, but and I appreciate you guys staying so long. We're cutting it off in 10 minutes period. But I would say fish store, you can't cut them all down because some of them do care, like the ones I sell to and Holly sells to. So one tip is ask them to feed in front of you. Make sure they're actually eating frozen food, right? Because if they try to put some live food in, no. I want to see them eat frozen food because that's a good indicator that it doesn't prove they're captive bred, but it proves that someone at least trained them under frozen. That's a good step, right? Also, as Ray said, if they're in a dedicated system, that means a lot. And make them feed, make sure they're in a dedicated system. And I think that's it for my tips. You guys got anything else before I move on? I'm sorry, we're just running so late.
Ask them what their water parameters are, their tank temperature, everything. Because I went through that and they had them set at about say 76. I said no, that's too warm, and they're looking at me like,
Yeah.
because they had everything else right.
No, that's right. And that's the reason for the individual tank too, is you want to keep seahorses under 74 degrees. And as Francis said, but if the store doesn't have knowledgeable people, you just come to Wine Wednesday and Seahorse Sources group on Facebook. But guys, we're so close to 3,000. Tell your friends. Okay.
I did see some questions people were asking about the enrichment that Cheryl and I use. So I brought, this is it. It's called Vibrance. It comes in 1 and 2, and it's from Ocean Rider in Hawaii. The spoon that I use to feed with, try to get it in this is actually the spoon you use to feed sea monkeys. If you've ever seen those, the little brine shrimp, I just stole their spoon. So if this gives you an idea, it's very small, like half the size of a push pin head, very tiny amount. And I sprinkle it on the frozen food after I've rinsed it. I let it. So the way I do it is I put it in a little shrimp strainer basket or a strainer you might use. I set it in a tiny bit of water. I sprinkle the powder on it. I set it in the refrigerator, for like 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes while I'm doing other stuff. And then I rinse it off. I squeeze it with a turkey baster. I float it in salt water, clean salt water, and give it to them. This is how I do it.
Yeah. Well, they've got a clear explanation on their website about how they advise most people to do it. Of course, me being the oddball, I have to do it differently. But
I will link.
How much would soak into freeze-dried mysis?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I will link the site when we're done. But go ahead, Cheryl.
That would be interesting.
And you were going to tell us how. Wait, Cheryl.
Like a light pink color. The shrimp will be like a light pink color, and it hasn't stained anything in my tank. So I think you just use a very tiny amount and
it's very, very.
Put it in water.
Well, yeah, Cheryl, you were going to tell us how you do it differently. How do you do it?
Well, I actually add the enrichment. I've got a little tiny glass dish, and I add a little bit of water. I add in a tiny amount of enrichment, just enough to turn the water red. And I let it sit there for 15 minutes. So it basically becomes an emulsified liquid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then what I'm doing, this is all experimental. Then I'm adding the frozen into it, and I keep turning it and stirring it, and the frozen actually turns red.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, completely red. And then when you put it in the tank, it has a tendency to float a little more than normal mysis, but it stays red, which is one of the things I was curious about, because that's been the question for years is,
Sorry.
can we enrich frozen without basically everything washing off?
Yep, and I told you guys that I messed up at first and I wasn't rinsing it. I don't do it either one of their ways exactly, kind of like Holly, but ever since I had the globs of orange everywhere, ugh, huge mess. Don't do that. Now I literally put it in a little half cup thing and I get the mysis I want. I get a little bit of water, I just sprinkle it on, stir it up to where it looks red, put it in the fridge, and then like 10 minutes later, maybe I pull it back out, stick it in my net, my brine shrimp strainer, and rinse it. And it still stays pink, but there's not all that excess crap that comes off in the tank.
Exactly. You're basically doing it similar to the way I'm messing with it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I just don't emulsify and all that. I love you, Cheryl. I'm not making fun of you. I'm saying I don't know. I don't even know what that word
That's
means.
what
Go
I'm
ahead,
doing.
Ollie.
It's putting in a Tupperware, soaking, basically, and then I strain off the liquid at the end. And
okay, well, we do. It's 10 o'clock, y'all. We got to get going. But thank you so much for all the participation tonight. This has been amazing. Please come and ask questions. This makes it more fun than us just sitting and talking about what we're doing. We want to help people. That's the point. And Maria said that her seahorse is trying to chase down the clown. So you're nervous he's going to be a jerk like my bachelors. But the store had its own tank and it was always empty unless they have seahorses. Awesome. I love to see that the stores are catching up. I know Cheryl still sees it places, but the stores I know have gotten the point. Seahorses need to be kept alone. I am curious. I would love to hear from you in the future how it goes with your clown, because that's such a debated topic. What?
I have had clowns draw blood on me.
Wait.
No.
Ray, it's a myth?
Hit and miss.
Hit and
It'll work
miss,
with
right.
some and not with others, depending on their personalities and the species.
Right.
But also,
And
before you sign off, I want to answer another Francis question.
Okay, can I say real quick my answer to hers and then I'll shush? I would just say, Maria, that like Cheryl was just saying, and your phrase made me wonder because you said my clown. If you have one, I think that's a big key to trying to keep clowns with seahorses. We typically don't recommend it. I'm so glad it's working for you. And I think that the difference is if you have two clowns, of course, one turns male, one turns female, excuse me, they're all male, one turns female. And then they become aggressive because they want to mate and they want to protect their area. I saw my two clowns in my reef tank tear a goby literally in half, shaking it like a dog in its mouth. My clowns were vicious little beasts. Okay. So I'm so glad to hear you have a nice clown. And if you have one with one seahorse, I think that makes a huge difference. And as we always say on this channel, even though we recommend things, what happens with your tank will help us figure out the future, because many people want to keep seahorses in reef tanks with reef fish. And there's lots of reasons why that can't happen. But because if you're successful, that's going to change our minds, just like the feeding and enrichment, everything expands and grows. So I would love to hear how things go for you. And if you have one seahorse in a tank with a clown, I'm glad he's a jerk. But okay, go ahead, Cheryl.
Real quick on clowns. Not in a seahorse tank, but I inherited a pair of clowns when I bought a used tank. And they started attacking my hand and drawing blood. So I got a 12cc syringe, filled it with water, put my hand in. Every time they started attacking my hand, I'd squirt them with water. It didn't hurt them, but they finally figured out if you didn't go after the hand didn't shoot you.
Yep.
And they literally learned to leave my hand alone. So they are teachable and trainable.
Absolutely.
Well, mine
Trying to get
didn't
the
learn,
sea dragon out of my hair.
having a
Sorry.
net, trying to catch them every time they come at me. They just kept on. I had those clowns for years and years and years. They never ever stopped, and they never stopped biting and leaving blood.
Well, the thing is, this pair they were going through sexual differentiation, and they were getting ready, trying to nest. So they were obviously protecting their territory. And it got to the point when they started drawing blood, I took one look at them and said, "You're going in the garbage disposal, or you're going to learn not to do this." I wasn't
Well,
in the garbage disposal, but I was a bit annoyed at the time.
yes, of course. We don't garbage disposal any fish, people. Never. Okay.
No.
But Maria said also, you can read it, but the clown was picked on for years, had a female that, yeah, the female's the butch for sure. And now he's just this scared little clown, stays in his corner. And I think that's key. I really do. I think that that's the, I shouldn't make any predictions here, but I think that's the answer is when you only have one clown, especially if it's male, then that's a totally different situation. And your seahorse is chasing the clown. So
I forget who it was.
I love it.
Somebody had a clown for like 25 years.
Oh,
It was in a seahorse tank. And all of a sudden, when it went into the geriatric stage, it started getting aggressive with the seahorses.
right.
Oh.
Well,
So you need to move it.
of course, watch them. But I just think you've hit on something. I really do think that's it. You know, when you have one and it's not a female, at least until they get older and territorial, I mean, I think that's the answer. So good for you, Maria. And definitely come back and tell us what's up. All right, Ray, answer the last
Francis,
question.
I think, is commenting about spoon size for the vibrants.
Yes.
And she's saying it's a 15 cc. And 15 cc cubic centimeters is the same as 15 milliliters, which is a tablespoon.
That's
which is
huge.
way, way too much.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So I don't want her getting something that and thinking she's going to feed that amount of fiber. I would say
Would
probably
it be the
quarter
size
of
of
a
the
teaspoon
push
is
thing
probably
on
too
a
much.
pen? Like the push thing when you push down on a pen, that little thingy,
Yep.
it's down that much.
I literally
Haven't
just take.
The picture. So
Maybe an eighth
teeny.
of a teaspoon.
I was gonna say I literally take the
I'd
bag
say
and go
half of
shake,
that.
just like tap it on the side. A little comes out, and that's enough to turn it red.
Yeah.
But
I'd
and this,
say
and,
what I'm using is probably a 16th or less of a teaspoon. Less than an eighth for sure. Maybe like even a quarter of an eighth.
You know the plastic silverware that you buy in the grocery store, and you pull out one of those little spoons. You need just a minute amount on
The
just
tip.
the tip of that
the
spoon.
tip.
I mean,
Yeah.
and
You
it's
guys are gonna get
a
me kicked
minute
off of
amount.
YouTube talking about the tip. All right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Very
Anyways, no, thank you so much, Ray, for pointing that out. I didn't catch that. I don't know the CCs and the measurements, so thank you for pointing that out. Okay, guys, listen, love you all. I love the participation this week. Please come back next week with new questions. Maria, I want to hear how things go for you, but the wine is gone, so we're gonna have to end it for the night.
This
Oh,
looks
look
like
at Cheryl's pretty seahorse cup. By the way, last thing, guys, if you ever, she's trying to do cheers and I'm not there yet. Sorry.
Yep.
If you ever want to join in and show us your tank, show us your seahorses, or just join in the actual video and chat, we welcome everybody. Just get a hold of me or anybody on this, and we can give you the link because we love the participation. But for tonight, we are going to have to go, and definitely tell all your friends to subscribe to the YouTube channel so they're entered into the 3,000 subscription contest that we're going to do, and stay tuned for the Ask Seahorse Source episode coming in 2 weeks. Okay, everybody say bye. Love y'all.
Good night.
Bye.
Cheers. Everybody cheers. Night, everybody.